So there are times when a previously unknown person momentarily steps into the limelight and then will quietly slip out of sight again. In the 60s and 70s, when I grew up in the music area, there were a whole lot of one-hit wonders. I'm going to give you about 3 or 4 of them. Crazy Elephant, the Lemon Pipers, Strawberry Alarm Clock, Iron Butterfly. And then you had some other singers, kind of like Lee Michaels and Zager and Evans, and they were all one-hit wonders. Their one hit was, I liked every one of the songs that they had, but that was about all they had that ever hit the charts. But then you've got some people that sometimes will make a one-time splash into life's pool, and then they are never known by name. They are only known by deed. And such is the woman here. Now, I asked you last week if you could guess the woman for today. How many got her? Nobody. So we're going to talk about the wise woman of Abel Beth Maacah. Now, you say, is that really biblical? Yeah, she's in the Bible. And she is a woman who walked out of obscurity right on to history's center stage. And she makes this one brief appearance, and then she returns from whence she came, but not without leaving a mark on the annals of Israel. So let me give you the background to her story. Israel is at the tail end of a civil war in 2 Samuel 20. Absalom had led a revolt against his father David, had literally run him from the throne, and now we were at the end of it because Joab had just killed Absalom, who the latter was hanging from a tree by his long hair, and Joab killed him with 3 spears. So while David is mourning his son, yes, his son, the same son that led a revolt, but he wanted a peaceful ending to the situation. So when Absalom dies, David mourns grievously. And as he is mourning, there is this worthless man by the name of Sheba. And Sheba then decides that he's going to take this insurrection and split the tribes even farther than what they are. So he tries, first of all, he accuses David. He hates David. And he accuses David of being loyal only to the southern tribes and ignoring the northern tribes from where he's from and many others. And so he is successful in getting the northern tribes to secede from David's authority, because David now is coming back to Jerusalem, being supported by the tribe of Judah, which is one of the primary tribes. And Sheba is able to get the northern tribes not to recognize him. But here's what happens with Sheba. When he's trying to lead this revolt against the returning king, no one of the northern tribes follow him. He's only got a small following. So Sheba knows that his life isn't going to be worth much, and he takes off. And he's got this small amount of people that's with him, these men that are with him, and they go to the far north region of Israel. Well, who is behind him? A man by the name of Joab, who is the commander of Judah's forces. And Sheba makes it to this city, Abel Beth Maacah, and he seeks refuge behind the walls. And Joab leads the army against this city and starts building a siege ramp so that he can topple the city and get that one man he's after. So while this is happening, while the ramp is being built, there is this wise woman that appears atop the wall. And that's where we pick up the reading in verse 16 of the 20th chapter of 2 Samuel. She says to them, Listen, tell Joab, come here that I may speak to you. And he came near her, and the woman said, "Are you Joab?" And he answered, "I am." Then she said to him, "Listen to the words of your servant." And he answered, "I'm listening." Now here I'm going to give you a few things to remember in the area of problem solving. The very first thing I'm going to give you, and all this is going to come from this narrative, is the most effective leader is the one most qualified. Your most effective leader in problem solving is the one most qualified. Now, I want you to look at the narrative itself in the beginning of it. The person who takes charge is not a political authority, is not a military commander, is not a city official. It is a woman gifted with wisdom. And she's the one that comes to the top of the wall. And she's the one that addresses the attacking army. She's gifted with this great gift of wisdom. Now, she's the one that when she comes to the wall, she asks for a chat with Joab. And when Joab comes, I want you to notice what she asks him. The very first question she asks him is, "Are you Joab?" That tells you two things. The first thing is, she doesn't know Joab. She's never met Joab. She's never seen him. She knows him only by reputation. And she knows that he is the commander of Judah's army. So she identifies who he is by asking him, "Are you Joab?" He acknowledges that he is. The second thing that it tells you is, it's not quite as apparent as the first one, but it tells you who's in charge. Because in this conversation, Joab isn't in charge. She is. She's asking the questions. She calls for him. He comes. She asks the questions. He answers. She's in charge, and that's where the narrative gets going. The most qualified leader is not necessarily the most educated, or the most dominant, or the most courageous, or even the most confident. The most qualified leader in any given thing, the best person to lead through any adversity, is going to be the person that is best, has the best life experience of the situation at hand. If I'm driving down the road and my car dies, and I get it off to the side of the road, what I don't do is call the editor of Car and Driver magazine. I call a trusted mechanic. I call the individual that knows cars and can fix cars. So the most qualified person is the one that should be leading in any given event. And that is the one that has the most education or the most experience in the situation at hand. Second thing I'll give you. When you're facing an unexpected problem, do the same thing you were taught all the while you were growing up. Keep your head on straight. Keep it on straight. Because you must be in control of the problem and never allow the problem to control you. Because once the problem controls you, you respond emotionally, not through wisdom. Always be in control of the problem. That is, you may not be able to control the problem itself, but be in control of the way that you approach the problem at best. So a problem presents us with a choice. Where every time we have a problem, anytime adversity comes our way, we've got a choice, and we've got 4 of them. We can either flee it, forget it, fight it, or face it. So I want you to take this to the narrative itself. The woman and the city, they both go together. The woman and the city could not flee the problem because there was nowhere to go. They could not forget the problem. That is, they couldn't just act as if it's not there and eventually maybe it would just go away. because the problem was getting worse by the minute. And she could not fight the problem because they didn't have the military strength to oppose the forces of Judah. They only had one choice, and that choice was to face the problem. And that's exactly what they do. They face the problem. So when you deal with a problem, always deal with a problem, let's say, before it gets bigger. Don't put it off. Don't flee it, forget it, fight it. Just deal with it. Deal with it in the very beginning. Any adversity that comes up, deal with it as soon as possible. Meet the challenge head on rather than ignoring it. It's always best. I was taught that growing up, so were you. It's always best. Even Scripture teaches us that. So confront adversity through such things as prayerful wisdom, knowledge of the situation, and then employing all resources that God has made available to you for this situation. And that's precisely what she did. There is no question that her wisdom had a prayerful base. There is no question that she had knowledge of the situation. She knew the army. She knew who was attacking. And then she was able to put into practice all of the resources that God had given her. And what was the resource? Wisdom. She'd been doing it for years. Wisdom. That's the resource she had. Whenever I look back at many of the, let's say, projects that I've done, I can think of several projects that I did at home, and be home projects such as whether it's running black pipe or whether it's building a fence or doing something else. I can remember some of these projects, getting to the end of it that may have taken me all day or maybe 2 days, admiring my work and telling myself I'd done such a wonderful job, and then it hits me. I could have saved material and time if I had just done it a little bit differently or went another direction than where I went. And I was taught that even when I was young. Always think about the job before you start it. Don't jump in till you give it some thought. So the woman had already given the problem prayerful thought. She took in consideration Joab's reputation. She took in consideration the character of the army itself. She knows Judah. She knows about Judah. She knows about Joab. She knows what she's facing, and thereby she addresses the problem by using the best method available. Third thing, problems are most often solved by employing the gift that God gives to each one of us. Reason and logic. They go under this umbrella of wisdom. So it makes this umbrella of wisdom, and underneath it you've got 2 steps. You've got reason and logic. Put them together. And then start solving the problem with those 2 things. Rather than attacking the opposition, concentrate on solving the problem. You may have to deal with the opposition of some kind, whatever the opposition may be, opposing forces, but forget the opposing forces and concentrate on solving the problem. And when you concentrate on solving the problem, then God will show you the steps that needs to be done in order to make that thing work, your plan work. So the wise woman quickly employs what? Persuasive logic. It's exactly what she employs, persuasive logic. And that's her weapon of choice. Her verbal assault includes, and we're going to read it in just a second, but her verbal assault includes, in verses 18 and 19, a question, a proverb, and an accusation. Now I want you to notice what she says. She says to Joab, they used to say in former times, let them but ask counsel at Abel, and so they settled the matter. Proverb. There's your proverb. She says, it has always been throughout the time that if someone needed wisdom, they would come to Abel and they would find an answer to their problem. And then she says, and I am one of those who are peaceable and faithful in Israel. And you seek to destroy a city that is a mother in Israel. Why will you swallow up the heritage of the Lord? All right, you got the proverb. Then you have the accusation. You seek to destroy a mother in Israel. So how did she know? She's not assuming it. I mean, it's right there before. The army's there beating on the wall. You're seeking to destroy a mother in Israel. And then she says and asks the question, and this is where she throws the ball back into Joab's court. She says, why will you swallow up the heritage of the Lord? She knows who she's dealing with, and she asks the question, and she puts Joab on the defensive. Her rebuke of Joab is basically bringing out two failures. First of all, she accuses him of ignoring the law, and the law is Deuteronomy 20, verse 10. She basically says, you are besieging a city without asking if the inhabitants intended to fight for Sheba. You're not even asking this. You don't know anything about the inhabitants. Because remember, she tells them, we are peaceful people. We are faithful to Israel. You didn't even ask. Second thing he failed to do. He didn't consider the fact, he didn't consider their reputation. And in so doing, she calls her city a mother in Israel. Now, is she talking about the city or is she talking about herself? Well, she's probably talking about the city, but indirectly herself. And when she uses the term a mother in Israel, it's simply because the city has always provided counsel and inspiration and well-being and leadership. Same thing a mother does with her children. So while others in the city were problem spotters, let's say you had two groups in the city. You had the problem spotters and you had the problem solvers. The problem spotters knew and were able to tell you there was an attacking army outside the walls. And then you have the solvers. The spotters aren't going to solve the problem. The solvers are. One of my favorite movies, Apollo 13, when they have this unidentified explosion on the aircraft, on the spacecraft. Jim Lovell makes his famous statement, Houston, we have a problem. Now what you've got in this incident, you have problem spotter and you have a problem solver. And the spotter are the astronauts on the vessel. Because they don't know what the problem is, so therefore they don't know how to fix it. And even if they knew how to repair the problem, they couldn't just run down to the hardware store and get what they needed and come back and repair the problem on the spacecraft. So they have limited resources. So they're the spotters. Here's the problem. And then who becomes the solver? The command center. The command center works on two basic things. One thing is immediate, and then the other is the overall objective. Because the immediate thing they work on is trying to get the CO2 level down and stop the oxygen from leaking out of the vessel. And then, once they do that, then they work on the plan to get the three men back to Earth. So problem spotters are plentiful. What we need are problem solvers. The difference between a problem and a predicament is that problems are solvable. Now here's what I want you to get about a problem. If a problem is solvable, it then means that that problem is temporary. Because if you can solve the problem, it's temporary. It's not going to last forever, it's just temporary. It's going to last until the solution is given. So problems then challenge us in the meantime. And they make us better and they stretch our abilities. Because I've always been taught, as well as you, it's the size of the person that's more important than the size of the problem. I want you to listen to what James says. He said, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds." Trials of various kinds. There's your problem. A problem is solvable, and being solvable, it's temporary. It's not going to last forever. You're facing these trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. There's going to be something that comes out of this in the end. You're going to gain steadfastness. And you're going to let that steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. And if any of you lacks wisdom, then what are you going to do? Ask the Father. Ask God. And He will give you the wisdom that you need, and He will give it generously to everyone who approaches Him. So you can employ the wisdom in order to solve the problem. And the problem is solvable. And the problem being solvable is temporary. Don't panic. Keep your head. Deal with the problem. Next thing that we learn. The solution to the problem must be in keeping with Christ's will, and it must be followed by action. The woman's use of logic put Joab in a difficult position. In football, the offense tries to get the defense on its heels. That way it can do what it wants. That is, if the defense is on its heels, it's reacting to the offense rather than attacking. What she did was she put Joab on his heels. He's now not attacking. He's now reacting to what she says. And she puts him in this position by doing what? By appealing to his stature in Israel. Are you Joab? I know you are. You're the commander of the army. And she puts him into, she addresses his stature. And she implies something. She implies that if you strike the city, then you will strike me. Now, that is something that any well-deserving man will not do. Even in Israel, he's not going to strike a woman of Israel. Even to kill her, especially to kill her. He's not going to do that. So this is a man who is a commander of God's army. That is beneath his honor. So now that she has put the ball in his court, he's got to make a decision, and he's answering her responses. And the wisdom seeks the mind of God and always weighs the points of the issue. Then determines the best way to approach it. So that's what she does. She uses her wit and her courage to save the city. Remember what I said? Possibly the nation. You say, how did she save a nation? Because if they had attacked the city, if Joab had attacked the city and destroyed it, he would have destroyed innocent people, and that would have further and maybe permanently have divided the northern tribes, and David would have never had their backing from that point on. So Joab answers in verse 20. He says, "Far be it from me, far be it, that I should swallow up or destroy. That is not true, but a man of the hill country of Ephraim, called Sheba, the son of Bichri, has lifted up his hand against King David. Give him up alone." That is, him only. All we want is him. "And I will withdraw from the city." And the woman said to Joab, "Behold, his head will be thrown to you over the wall." And then the woman went to all the people in her wisdom, in her wisdom, and they cut off the head of Sheba, the son of Bichri, and threw it out to Joab. And Joab then ordered the trumpet to be blown to remove the army from the attacking position. And they dispersed from the city, every man to his own home, and Joab went back to the king. Now, I want you to notice what the woman said to Joab. When she says, "The head of Sheba will be thrown to you over the wall," she's not just saying, "This is what I'm going to do in response to what you want." She's actually telling Joab, "I agree with you. This man is worthless. This man is leading a revolt against Israel. This man is causing a problem in God's nation. So I agree with you, and therefore I will go ahead with the response that you're asking for. I have found through my short life that women are often quicker to act on certain issues than are men. If you mention to a man, say for instance, something that needs attention but is not urgent, then he is likely to say something to the order of, "I'll look at it later." But I've also noticed that if you mention this same thing to a woman and it catches her interest, then she is more inclined to say, "I have an idea that might work," and then immediately goes to work. I've seen it happen more than once. I get home the other day, in the afternoon, late afternoon, and my wife says there's a pole that I got for a hummingbird feeder, and it won't fit our deck. So we discuss it, and I said, well, I can make it fit, and there's a way that I could do that. And she said, as we're discussing, she said, well, I have an idea. And she told me that you just lay a board up there on the top of the railing, diagonally, corner and in the corner, and then she can clamp the pole to that board. That was going to save material and time from what I was thinking. So we did that, and she said that, and I said, well, I think that will work. And then I say, we can do that in the morning. And then I think, almost immediately, I think, why not today? Why not now? We'll have time. So I get the board, we cut it, we install it, and within 20 minutes, her hummingbird diner is open for business. Now, she rewards me from acting quickly. And she comes home a few days later with another pole. And she wants that installed. When you and I are praying about a problem that's a lot more than just installing a hummingbird feeder, and we're praying about an issue that needs attention, and God reveals to us what that next step must be, do we hesitate? Do we wait for a more convenient time? Or do we immediately get started? When He shows us what that next step is, do we wait or do we start? When we employ wisdom, just like this whole narrative is about, when we employ wisdom and we then execute by reason and logic under God's guidance, then what we do is we address the problem, and then we have to allow and depend upon God to bring the solution to the problem. He tells us what we must do. We act, and then He brings the solution. And that's the three-part system. God, what did you say? Am I acting on it? And the solution belongs to Him. And that is precisely what you find in the wise woman of Abel Beth Maacah. Father, I thank you for an example in Scripture that we read, and we have read it before and really never gave it any attention, not like it deserved. You showed us a woman who acted with wisdom that saved her city, possibly saved her nation. You show us through what she did how we are to handle and tackle the problems and the difficulties of life and the issues that come our way. And we do it with the wisdom that you've given us, employing the things that are necessary in order that you will be glorified, not us. You will be. And your kingdom will be benefited. You have given us an opportunity to serve you in this life, and with that comes a lot of hurdles. And those hurdles can only be jumped when you're in the lead. So help us, Father, to do exactly as she did, that we employ wisdom, we listen to what you have to say, we act upon what you have to say as soon as it is necessary. Even if it is immediate, we act. And then we depend upon you for the result. And you brought the result in this narrative. When the army of Judah removed from the walls of the city, and no life was taken other than one, and that one was the rebel of the nation. So, Father, I thank you that when we face problems, we have wisdom, and we have a God who knows exactly how to solve the problem. And if the problem isn't solved, we have a God who gives us the grace to deal with it. And we have a God who loves us enough to get us through all of the problems and the difficulties and the hurts and the pains and the sorrows of life. And we depend upon you every day. And thank you for loving us so much that you gave your Son that we can be part of your family. And whatever we face in life, we face it never alone. We face it with you. And for that we give you the praise and the glory. In Jesus' name, amen.